Okay. My name is Ramirez. Oh wait, I should. Okay. My name is Ramirez, Frog Bear, Rami, and self-professed targeted individual. I'm joking. But so today is going to be why weak men. Um, and this actually just plays into everything that I've been researching with what I found about the sexual revolution, Kinsey 1930, um, MK Ultra, cybernetics. This all plays into it because when you think about the effects of why men today are weak against women, right? Not being able to, that whole red pill movement of being aware of the interplay between men and women. Um, this plays heavily into what I was trying to describe, and it reminded me of a very old article from like 2018. It was called what's it called? Operation Surprise Party. Ooh, wrong one. So, an Operation Surprise Party, it was an operation that led to the discovery of this. They gave 15 indictments to a prison where they found 15 people in North and South Carolina are facing federal charges, including 5 inmates. Department of Corrections, our purpose here today. Essentially, you had these inmates who were using cell phones to essentially entice these guys and they were specifically targeting military men. And the whole con that they were running was basically first they would entice them, they would continue texting them, but by the time that these inmates were texting the military officers, and it got as far as them getting sent nudes, uh, eventually another inmate would then contact this military officer to then tell him like, "Oh, I'm the father. Like, how could you do this to my daughter?" Essentially extorting money out of these guys. And it says official service members lost more than $550,000. People on the outside then deposit money into bank accounts. South Carolina prison boss Brian called the lawmakers Washington to ease the troubles of blocking cell phones behind bars, unfettered access, whatever. This is the local channel. Then the New York Times wrote about it, where they were targeting military authorities. Say, where is it? The so-called extortion ring succeeded in getting 442 service members to pay a total more than 560. According to news released from the NCIS, the service members were involved in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. The 5 inmates indicted so far face a mixture of federal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, and extortion to obtain money. They used a network of bank accounts, money transfer services, online payment services, and prepaid debit and credit cards. We do not lock up criminals so that they can go to prison to continue their criminal conduct. Yeah, whatever. Here's a Washington Post article. Same thing. Inmates posing as women online blackmailed hundreds of troops in a extortion scheme. This is the only article that I found. Apparently, it's Joseph L. Jordan. He actually claims that this investigation, at least as early as 2015. Now, how does this play into what I'm trying to describe? Well, when men are weak towards the interaction with women, when they're striving and when they're not striving, but starving for this sort of attention or starving for that sort of companionship, you will usually find that men will degrade themselves in a variety of different ways. But in this case, they were lying and saying that the pictures that they were receiving were from underage girls, which is why a lot of these servicemen felt the need to pay off these extortions because they didn't want to lose their careers. They didn't want to lose their positions. But this also plays into a very bigger issue, which is kind of what I want to talk about, which is the addiction to pornography, the addiction that is usually developed at a very young age. And the reason why I bring that up, I actually forgot to bring up this article, was just this, 2019, a year later, somebody releases this article I don't know how the conversation. Watching pornography Watching pornography rewires the brain to a more juvenile state. This article basically describes that there is a sort of tolerance that you develop while watching all of this material. And it says right here, should zoom this in just a bit so it actually can be read. Pornography satisfies every one of the prerequisites for neuroplastic change. When pornographers boast that they are pushing the envelope by introducing new, harder themes, what they don't say is that they must, because their consumers are building up a tolerance to the content. And the article further elaborates that it develops dysfunctions with erectile dysfunctions, them not being able to satisfy themselves, that they keep pushing the envelope. Eventually, you get these really weird relationships where the article describes a very dark sense of what's going on. But when you think about the overall larger image of what's going on is, at the end of the day, it's the fact that men are weak towards this interaction with the opposite sex. And what I found very egregious is the fact that they were targeting specifically military guys. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a conspiracy, that these prisoners were influenced by some grand scheme thing, but I think what it really highlights is the weakness that men have towards women. And that's a very big issue, because look at what's occurring right now with all these simps that are just boasting the egos of all of these females. And it plays into a larger part of what we see with so an example would be the MK Ultra studies of LSD, and how essentially they were using women to entice men to bring them into these rooms, these hotel rooms, or these controlled areas with cameras, where they would then feed LSD to all of these people. And in some cases, some people say that they would catch them in compromising positions, but I think they were just overall largely studying the effects of LSD on the human male. And what I'm essentially trying to describe is the fact that this is what they want. They want people to be weak. They want people to be malleable. They don't necessarily care for how this occurs or how this happens. In reality, they just want the overall populace of men to be weak towards the interactions with females. And with them being stuck in a more juvenile state, right, neuroplasticity, and the fact that I made a video called Malleable versus Unmalleable, and how, based on your experience growing up, your brain will stay at certain age points. So usually, a great example would be where you have adult men who are still acting like juveniles in their day-to-day lives, in their day-to-day interactions, where they're still stuck in a more emotional state than they are in a rational state. And how do I describe what I'm trying to say? The effects of this whole industry have been long lasting in the populace of men. And when you leave them this weak, and when you leave them this vulnerable to that what do you call it, that thirst or that want, that need, they'll do anything. And when you have that sort of interaction with these people, not people, but yeah, it's a very difficult thing that I'm trying to describe. Because at the end of the day, they want weak men. They want you to be at the behest of your desire, your need. And when they leave you in that state, essentially, you won't necessarily strive for anything else. You'll be stuck in that reality tunnel where you won't break out of looking at a bigger overall goal in life. And I don't know, I'm essentially just looking at the overall image of the system science, where if you leave men in this wanting state, it won't let them, essentially you'll leave the populace stuck. They won't strive for trying to figure out the overall inner workings of what's going on. They'll stay stuck in the reality of, oh no, I got caught doing this. I don't even know how to describe this. This is a very awkward video for me to make. Um, I guess a great example that I could use is myself, where when I was much younger, by the ages of 23 to 27, I'll say, I got really stuck in this need of wanting companionship, of wanting the attention or the interaction of the opposite sex, that I myself got into some very depraved states, which kind of led me into really wanting to understand why I was stuck in this way. And it's basically sedation. You're basically sedating yourself with all of this content in order to escape reality, right? For me, it was video games, heavily video games. And, essentially, when you leave these people in these sedated states, they won't try to strive for anything better. They won't try to strive for more. And I think it's incredibly daunting when you're trying to figure out, like, now with the red pill movement and with men going their own way, the MGTOW movement, you're essentially seeing that a lot of these men have escaped that reality tunnel and they've realized that this is all just a game. And when you think of the overall system science or the overall theme of what the goal in life is, quote unquote, it's to have a family, to have that American dream, right? But what we're not seeing is how all of these new factors, social media, Instagram, dating apps, have largely affected the way that we interact with one another. And when you fuck with that whole paradigm, you essentially leave the entire populace stunted, especially when you have the women. It's not that they have the women this way, it's just that when you bombard even the opposite sex with all of this attention, it skews them the other way, because then they'll want more, they'll want better, and won't necessarily want what they have in front of them. So essentially breaking the dynamic between men and women. And in this case, with the extortion case, it goes to show you that this is why they want weak men. They want weak men so that they're susceptible to extortion tactics like this. When they're susceptible to, when let's say, for an example, when they're trying to target somebody that specifically knows that if there's a military officer that's working this top secret program or working this case or working this investigation, if you target that individual using a pretty lady or a pretty woman, essentially you can then infiltrate the environment of that individual and then begin to influence him slowly. A great example of this is that what was that politician, Eric Swalwell, where basically the Chinese essentially gave or introduced him to a female agent that essentially Eric Swalwell started banging her, and where we are now with that, especially with that's just one example of one politician getting extorted. There's other examples like Dianne Feinstein having her driver be a CCP member, later turning out to be a spy after, what was it, 15, 17 years? The whole point is, at the end of the day, this is why they want weak men. They want them susceptible to this because it is a natural desire for a man to want a woman. And it is the easiest control factor that you have over the general populace of men. So it's kind of that whole thing of, what was that Tony Montana quote? First you get the money. It was like, first you get the money and then eventually you get the women, right? Because women, this is such a very simple science, because they don't want to create anything elaborate, anything complex. They want it to be as very easily accessible as possible. And by that, I mean, they want easily accessible control over the populace. And one of the easiest ways to control men, by and large, is women and their natural desires to copulate, or their natural desires to want to interact with the female sex. So I don't know if I'm missing the point here or not, but this all relates to the 1930s thing with Kinsey and the fact that he knew that when you put these people in these depraved states, they'll only want their carnal desires. And if you were setting up this control mechanism to entice normal people into a way to blackmail them, or into a way to put them into compromising positions, or in the cases of celebrities, right? There's always this thing that I've noticed with the celebrities giving tips is, don't take drinks from people, right? Don't take an open bottle, don't take an open drink, because you don't know what's in there. And especially when it's coming from a pretty face, that tolerance goes down, because you can right, the whole thing is trusting women. But I don't know, I probably did not do a good job of explaining this in the video. But there is something to be said about how porn, or pornography, I'm using the C because, trying to avoid YouTube algorithm detection, is when you have people with this unrealistic sense of expectations, they become very susceptible to the experience that you could deliver to them. It's kind of why, what is it called? Pex kittens? I'm not trying to say the S word, but how a certain intelligence agency will use female operatives to kind of entice these people to divulge their secrets, to give a valuable information, or to use a pretty face in order to invite them into a more controlled environment. Either way, my name is Ramirez. Probably didn't do a good job of explaining this, but thanks for watching.